What is up, my friends? Welcome to Showtop Games. I'm your turtle host, and today we'll be doing a casual review of the 1 to 6 player game Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape, designed by Alex Altinu and Marco Portugal, published by Kumon. Before starting, there are a few things that my viewers should know. First, I've never actually played the first Massive Darkness, so I won't be able to speak to the improvements and changes that were implemented between that game and this one. Second, although I did receive the Kickstarter version of this game, I will not be reviewing any of the stretch goals or expansions that may have come with it. This review will focus on the base game experience only. So what's in the box? Well, we have the instruction booklet and the rules for each encounter, a little guide to see how the pieces get set up inside the box, character-specific tokens, treasure loot tokens, bad guy tokens, more treasure loot tokens, character-specific tokens and turn tokens, doors, chests, traps, healing wells, loot tokens, corruption and time tokens, fire and ice tokens. Basically a lot of tokens in this game. 2 bridge tiles over there. These are going to be your character-specific little pads. Okay, so for the shaman, the wizard, paladin, berserker, we have our leveling cards here. Round and boss tracker, boss cards, roaming monster decks. I'm pretty sure this is actually garbage. I don't know why I've kept this. Okay. 1 tray of miniatures over here. You can see groups of 6 for the mob monsters. More tokens, health, and mana. We have another set of monster miniatures over here. We have our lightbringers over here. And we have our mob leaders over here. And our bosses and roaming monsters over here. Six plastic character trays. Bag for the rogue. Bag for the loot tokens. Color-coded miniature bases. Little trackers for your plastic trays over here. Whole bunch of different kinds of dice. All the game tiles that come with the game. Actually put that back here because there's no room on this table. Over here we have our door cards. We have our mob decks. And I think we also have, we got our character cards over here. Okay. This is all the loot cards: common treasure, rare treasure, epic treasure, and the starting equipment that you can choose from. Character-specific decks, so these are going to be used for leveling up. And we've got our mob items over here, based on level. So yeah, my game's not exactly the most organized thing you'll ever see in your life, but it is really difficult to figure out where everything goes, especially with all the space that the miniatures take up. So yeah, sorry. So what is this game? Well, Massive Darkness 2 is a light, cooperative dungeon crawler that pits you and your buddies against demonic and sometimes angelic foes. You'll be taking the fight to your enemies as you attempt to enter into their inferno realm and end the darkness once and for all. The base game isn't one of those long campaigns where you're making important choices over time and slowly leveling up your gear and your character over many, many playthroughs. In fact, each game will have your chosen hero start from 0 experience with basic equipment, and will have you slowly get stronger through the scenario that you're playing. So to play the game, you'll select one of a handful of missions in the back of the book. It can be any mission, regardless of order. However, I do recommend that you go in sequence so that the story progression makes more sense. Each mission will give you victory objectives, failure conditions, and will also give you the tile layout and token setup for each mission. You'll be taking on the role of a lightbringer in your dungeon diving. Each player receives a plastic tray to hold their hero card, weapon cards, equipment cards, and experience and level pins. Heroes have starting health and mana stats as shown here, and each hero also has a special ability unique to them. For instance, this hero can ignore some damage in combat, kinda making him pretty viable as a tank. They also have another unique ability that may come from attacking in the shadows. When you attack in an area with no light, for instance, this area has light, this one does not, you also get to roll this purple shadow dice. It has bonus damage and mana bonuses, but it can also land on this weird looking two-faced side. This will allow your hero to activate their unique shadow ability. For instance, this hero allows all heroes in a consecrated zone to perform a recover action. To make each hero feel even more special, they also get a deck of skill cards that they can choose from at the start of the game and each time they level up. You only get to choose one card each opportunity, so players will have to decide whether or not they want to get additional skills or focus on leveling up existing skills. And there's usually some kind of gimmick for each hero. Sometimes they involve an entirely new piece of cardboard. Other times they'll use something else like their own token bag or something. These so-called classes will create changes to gameplay depending on who you choose to play as. For instance, the Paladin can spend mana to place consecration zones within their line of sight. Heroes that enter into these zones will receive special benefits. These special things will make players really think about who they're picking to play as, since synergy between certain heroes can vary. Each Lightbringer is quite unique compared to the rest. Depending on who you choose to play as, your style and approach is going to be quite different. As the game progresses, you'll get stronger through gaining experience from killing monsters and from getting loot. The game feels a lot like some looter video games. For instance, Diablo should come to mind for anybody who's familiar with that game. Actually, I'm pretty sure the creators were definitely inspired by that game, seeing as the theme is so freakishly similar. Anyways, there will be a loot bag that you're going to draw from each time treasure is revealed. The tokens will refer to the decks that you draw from when it's time to get your loot. Green is the basic stuff, blue is the good rare stuff, and purple is the epic awesome stuff. The game will slowly get more epic loot as you progress in your quest, so you're not stuck with garbage gear for the entire playthrough. Loot can come in the form of weapons, armor, and accessories. Weapons will tell you what kind of die and how many to roll when attacking. As you can see here, 1 yellow dice. Other loot is going to give you things like defense buffs, rerolls, and other neat abilities. Now, in terms of who you'll be fighting, there are 3 types of enemies in the game. There are mob enemies, there are roaming enemies, and a small number of bosses to face off against. Each one functions slightly different, but not so different that you'll easily forget their mechanics while playing. Remember, this dungeon crawler is designed to be accessible and light. Mob enemies travel in a group, and depending on your party size, there's gonna be more mob creatures. They also get to roll more dice depending on how many monsters are still left alive in their party. The mob leader looks a little bit different from the rest, and can't be killed until all the other mob units are killed first in its group. When the leader dies, the mob is destroyed and an additional 2 experience is given to each hero, but functionally, it doesn't really do anything different. Roaming enemies spawn by themselves and are usually much more massive. They have more specific instructions on their cards to instruct how they activate on their turns, and will generally have a larger pool of health. Killing these will net 4 additional experience points for every hero on the board. And now, bosses are unique to the scenario and get their own sheets and darkness trackers. They have a variety of rules that are special to the encounter and will go after each player's turn instead of waiting till the enemy phase to act. These fights get harder and longer as you go through them and serve as some real challenges to the Lightbringers. So it's important to note that the monsters you'll be facing are drawn from monster decks that correspond to the strongest hero's level. So as you get stronger, so do your enemies. Each mob or roaming monster has a level 1 to 2 deck, level 3 to 4 deck, and a level 5 deck to match your hero's current level. The weapons that the mobs will be wielding also get stronger, as these mob items are also scaled in the same way. Mob items add for some attack variability and some pretty sweet loot as well. When in combat, you'll be rolling a lot of dice. There are yellow and orange dice, which represent your damage. Orange has more swords, but yellow has a better chance to get mana back. There's also that purple dice we talked about before, possibly triggering hero special abilities. There's also defender's dice, which you roll simultaneously with your attacking dice. Every shield rolled will negate a sword that the attacker has rolled. Oh, and let's not forget about the fun black dice that the enemies roll. These will possibly wound your heroes or activate some strange enemy abilities. Again, everything is rolled at once, which makes it quick but can also result in a lot of dice being chucked. The game rounds are split up into 4 distinct phases. The first phase is the hero phase, where players get to choose the order of play, and then each Lightbringer takes 3 actions total. They can take a move action, where they gain 2 movement points, and they can spend them on either moving, opening doors, or interacting with an object. Real quick, every time you open a door, you reveal a new area and you have to draw from the door deck. This will result in some surprises that may spawn more enemies, give you more experience, or sometimes do very little. If there are monster tokens, or treasure tokens, inside the room that you've just discovered, you'll have to draw tokens or cards to figure out what gets placed in the newly discovered room. This makes exploration quite interesting, as you never really know what's lurking behind each door. Now moving on, heroes can also use their actions to attack an enemy. There are 3 types of weapons in the game. First and foremost, the melee weapons require your hero to be in the same area as the enemies. Magic weapons require you to be either in the same area or 1 away, and range weapons require you to be at least 1 away, and you can draw a line of sight between yourself and the group of enemies. If combat's not your fancy, you can also take actions to trade items with allies in your zone, or you can even use it to recover health or mana. Some specific cards, for instance the wizard card here, also allows you to have specific special actions unique to the card. So this one allows you to gain 3 mana if you decide to spend an action point on it. When all the heroes are done, the enemy phase occurs. Each mob gets 2 actions to attack. If they can't attack, it uses its actions to move. Monsters usually go for the closest player, with players deciding if there's a tie. Also, players choose the order of enemy activation. The combat works the same as when heroes attack, but they do not get to roll the shadow dice. And as stated before, roaming enemies get a special text to dictate how they activate. You go from the top to the bottom until conditions are met for a certain action. If none are met, they play out just like a mob enemy. And after the enemies are all done, there's the level up phase. If a hero has enough experience, as shown here, level 2 is 5 experience, level 3 is 10 experience, they'll get to move their pin up by 1 and get some pretty sweet benefits. So at level 2, they'll get usually more HP or more mana. They also get to put more awesome loot tokens into the loot bag to increase their chances of getting better loot later into the game. In addition, they'll also be able to choose another skill card to add to their play area. They can either choose to modify an existing one or get a brand new skill that they didn't have before. Last but not least, there's the darkness phase, in which the round tracker gets moved up. Now, if it lands on a spot with an icon, it's either going to add something like a monster or more loot. In this case, this is going to add a roaming monster. In this case, it adds a better loot token to the loot bag. Over here, it adds a regular mob monster, and makes it so that the game keeps changing as you play. When this phase is done, the 4 phases repeat until the players either win or lose. Then, in addition to all that fun stuff I stated before, the game also has some additional things to look out for. For instance, they have these spiked and bear traps over here that when you flip over, could reveal some pretty interesting things. This one makes you lose an action. This one, well, this is lucky, nothing happens with this one. There's also pillars that might obscure your vision if you're using a ranged attack. There's fountains to heal from, and there's also these forges that are going to be used to melt useless loot into maybe better loot. So, What do I like about this game? Well, I mean, to start, it's a Kumon game, so the miniatures are pretty good quality. It's not setting any records or new standards for the company, but they're pretty darn nice to look at, and the game gives you a ton. The roaming and boss monsters are really big and finely detailed, and the mob monsters, you get so many of them, and each one really adds to the overall aesthetic and feel of this dungeon crawler. If you take a look, these minis are actually pretty darn cool. You got these horn monsters over here, this angry looking fella with this halberd. You got this roaming monster I keep showing you, and the Grim Reaper has octopus tentacles coming out of it. It's just real interesting stuff going on. Also, I'm a big fan of these trays. Usually, when I'm playing games that have a ton of equipment, they're sliding all over the table. It's nice that these have these slots with these little mini walls to make sure nothing moves around and it just kind of keeps everything nice and neat on the game board. And also, yeah, this game is a simple, easy to learn, easy to teach, not mentally taxing dungeon crawler. Not that I don't like mentally taxing dungeon crawlers, but once in a while, something like this is kind of nice. The games don't take forever, there's no huge, massive campaign with a whole bunch of things to write down, and each scenario, your character kind of starts from scratch, so you can play with a new group every time if you really wanted to. Don't remember what happened in the last game? Doesn't matter. Also, I think one of the best things about this game is the asymmetry of all the characters. I mean, the paladin's is going to be busy placing these consecration things on the ground. The shaman gets to summon things and mess with elements. The berserker thrives on getting hurt and uses its damage to boost its attack. And the wizard gets this little spinny dial thingy. And I also think these mob monsters is a really nice aesthetic touch to the game. It's nice that it's not just kind of one monster walking around. I mean, sometimes you do have one monster walking around, but in that case, it's scary and still awesome. But when you look at these mob monsters, it's nice because it's this group of enemies that you have to whittle down bit by bit instead of just one little small baby monsters that's just kind of walking around on its own. Alright, so behind me we got those flame boys over here, and the skeleton mobs are in front of us. Now if I go up north, there's that scary thing, so I guess, yeah, I'll take the skeletons. And also with these looter type games, the thrill of drawing from these item decks is really awesome. I mean, sure, you'll get a whole bunch of junk that you might not need, but also that just makes it so that when you get what you want for that perfect build of yours, it just feels amazing. What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get? Ugh, I hate this game. I love this game! Oh, and let's not forget that the mobs also carry their own unique items. Now, this is also cool because it adds some variability to each mob group. They're not always going to attack the same way. I mean, if you take a look at this, if they're using a soul diffuser compared to a primeval club, I guarantee you they're going to attack a little bit differently with some different dice. And if you kill them, it's also a nice way to get some sweet, sweet loot once again. Hey, buddy. Nice soul diffuser you got over there. And before I get too carried away with the loot in this game, I do want to say that it's nice that the game also provides you with multiple scenarios. It might not be enough or variable enough for some people, but for me, I do feel like it's nice that one of these objectives is to protect an NPC, another one is to try to open a gate, another one is to destroy crystals, another one is to defeat bosses. It's nice and it adds a little bit of variability to this game. And also player count. My goodness, it is nice when a game does not force you to play with 4 characters or a certain amount of characters to get the best gameplay out of the game. The game scales with you in terms of mob monsters, number of revives, and health points for enemies. It makes it so that you don't have to play with this magical number of people. Are there best player counts? Absolutely. But you can play with 2 people, you can play with 3, you can play with 4, and the game's going to scale for you. Oh, and last but not least, I love the fact that the game allows you to use revive tokens. Now, depending on how many players you're playing with, you're going to get a certain amount, but it's just kind of nice to know that even if you get unfairly one-shot by a monster, you just flip this over and you get to still play in the game. So, what are some things that people might not like about this game? Well, to start off with a small one, the component quality is a little bit strange. I mean, you get these nice boards and these trays to hold your equipment, and then the game also gives you like this Darkness Tracker. It's a flimsy little piece of paper to track the progress of your game, and the same material was even used for the bosses. It's just this front and back flimsy little piece of paper. I mean, I would have preferred a piece of cardboard or something, but it's not a deal breaker, but it is a little bit strange to me. And yeah, although this could be a positive depending on your mood, um, some people are not going to like the fact that this is not some kind of campaign where the characters slowly grow over time and you slowly get to level up and equip your character from scenario to scenario. This game is not going to offer you that. It's a pretty much a one-shot scenario each time where you reset your equipment back to level number one each time and you don't really make any real progress between game to game. So when you finish one scenario with all your awesome S tier armor and equipment, if you go to the next mission, you're going to lose all that and go back to your starting battered leather armor that you had in the beginning of the last scenario. Hey, congratulations on beating the mission and having this awesome gear. Well, now, let's, yep, get rid of all of that. Yep, perfect. And here's your starting equipment again. There you go. Enjoy. And yeah, although I stated before that it's nice that each mission's kind of different from the other one, some people are not going to like the fact that the game only comes, at least the base game, I'm sorry, only comes with about 10 missions, you know? It's not going to satisfy everybody, and it's going to leave some people wanting a little bit more. Yes, there's a ton of extra content that you can buy, but I mean, that's the key word, is buy. Some people are not going to want to do that, and I get it. Oh, and let's talk about these mob leaders. I mean, they look awesome. Look, this guy's got a huge hammer compared to the little baby mobs in the background. You would think that he does some awesome things, especially because you can't kill him until everybody else is dead in the group. But at the end of the day, he has the same amount of health as everybody else. He doesn't get any extra abilities, and he doesn't really do anything special. You just can't kill him until he's the last one. That's really the only thing that makes a mob leader a mob leader. So I wish there was something about them that made them unique, but no, they're just another unit in a mob. So you tell me you got the same amount of health, no special attacks, and you just look stronger than the mobs in your group? Why are you even a mob leader? And with a lot of dungeon crawlers out there that employ dice, combat can be a little bit swingy. I mean, you're rolling all this dice, and sometimes you get really lucky, and then other times you get really unlucky. So for my giant ultimate final attack, I have missed with all 6 of my dice, and I get 2 wounds. Wonderful. Oh, and in terms of difficulty, there are times when sometimes the game seems a bit too easy. I mean, sometimes your character gets really OP, even though the enemies scale with you. There are times when you swing and you have so many abilities like doubling your attack power or re-rolling during combat, or this one just straight up allows you to kill a minion in an area that you're in, that sometimes you'll just wipe out an entire mob group by yourself, or sometimes you'll just negate all the damage that an enemy tries to do to you. Which brings me to my next point. You do tend to get a lot of different abilities in this game, especially as you go further and further into it. And sometimes you're not going to remember all of them. You know, sometimes you're going to forget that you can double your attack with this item. Sometimes you're going to forget that you have this special ability that allows you to ignore a wound. Sometimes you're going to forget that you get +2 defense because of this armor just automatically. Or sometimes you'll forget with this set you could ignore 1 die when you're defending. It gets to be a lot, even if each individual piece is rather simple. Before I drop the subject of this game sometimes feeling a bit too easy, I do feel like it would have been nice to kind of remove some of the player choice when the enemies and the mobs are acting. So for instance, if this mob comes in here, the players get to choose, will they attack this person or this person? And let's say this person's 1 hit away from dying and it's in the mob's best interest to attack them, they're not going to do it because the players get to choose and they choose that they attack this. Giant buff guy with OP weapons that's probably going to slaughter that mob the moment they attack it. And lastly, with a lot of Kumon games, there's a ton of extra content. I mean, some people might like that, but I mean, to me, all that extra content. I mean, like, I bought the base game and it came with all these other things. This is still in the shrink wrap. I haven't even opened this yet. I mean, there's so much to get. So, for anybody who's kind of a completionist and they need everything, you're going to have to spend a lot of money on a lot of different content that, might I add, is very difficult to store. If you saw my unboxing, you'll know that there's not a lot of space in this box, and if you have all these expansions and extra content, storing them and making them easily accessible, it's kind of gonna be a challenge, and that's gonna turn a lot of people away from this game. So overall, I did enjoy Massive Darkness 2, but it's also not the best dungeon crawler I've played. It has a flavor to it that's very similar to other Kumon games. At times, I felt like I was playing Zombicide or Death May Die, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but also not a super awesome thing for people looking for something fresh. But it's a formula that works, and it definitely provides some pretty fun moments. The asymmetry of the characters and the cool miniatures is the main draw of this game, and it feels great growing your hero and blasting apart mobs of baddies, but sometimes I did find myself wanting more out of the character customization and the monster AI systems. Sometimes the game will feel like a bit of a slog, and sometimes you'll find yourself more interested in the miniatures than the actual game, but it's still very much fun. I recommend this game to people who are fans of cooperative games and love crawling through dungeons with their friends. If you like other Kumon games like Zombicide, you'll probably also like this title. People who enjoy adventure games but hate keeping track of character sheets, story developments, and item shops should definitely check this one out. It's easy to teach, and as far as a dungeon crawler goes, it's relatively straightforward, so people who like to nonchalantly wander through demon infested corridors will like this kind of game. And obviously, if you're just looking for a board with a bunch of cool looking miniatures all over it, then you'll love this. I don't recommend this game if you didn't like Zombicide or if the theme of demons and hellfire turns you off. People looking for in-depth combat systems, heavy character growth, and an intricate story may want to stay away. If you really care about narrative and tight balance in your games and don't like the one-off formula that this title employs, I would recommend a different dungeon crawler. Also, if you don't like dice, obviously, this game will probably scare you off with its multicolored and multi-symbol dice that it's offering. I give this game a silver shell.
Hey, Bunnies here! This is a game that bunnies will play only when other games are not on the shelf. I can't find a reason not to like it. It has boss battling, it's not extremely long, it has decent quality figures, character building, and it's a fun cooperative game. It is everything bunnies want from a non-Euro game. However, I just can't bring myself to love it. If anything, I have to blame the theme. Yeah, that must be it. I'll give it a silver carrot.
And so, thank you for joining us today. If there's anything that you'd like to add, comment in the section below. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. We'll see you next time.